Well, one of the aims of Alexander Studies Online is to tell people about research that advances their understanding of the Alexander technique. And I'm very pleased to be here today with Julia Woodman, who's going to tell us a bit about some of the clinical research trials that have been conducted so far. I'd like to start by asking you, Julia, where does your own interest in research stem from?
Well, my background was in immunology research, and then I spent many years in the pharmaceutical industry working with clinical trials. And then later on, when I trained to be an Alexander teacher, then I became part of the study team for the Atlas neck pain trial.
Okay. And I believe you've also published a review of evidence for the effectiveness of Alexander lessons in various sort of health-related conditions. Is that right?
Yeah, and that was published back in 2012. So it could do with being updated because there's been more recent research, like Atlas and other stuff. But the aim really was to try and bring together all of the available research about the effectiveness of Alexander lessons for different healthcare conditions. And that's important because we live in a world of evidence-based medicine. And quite rightly, people want to be reassured that any intervention is effective and safe for whatever they're using it for. But it kind of creates quite a challenge for complementary healthcare type interventions because research is incredibly expensive and resource intensive, and we just don't have the same kind of access to funding and to those kind of resources that, say, any pharmaceutical drug would. So, it's a challenging environment in order to be able to do any kind of research with complementary healthcare. And in terms of the Alexander technique, it's true we've got a very small research base, but what we've got is actually pretty good. So we've got, in particular, a couple of very solid randomized controlled trials in musculoskeletal health pain conditions.
Yeah, and those two are the ones for chronic neck pain and chronic back pain. That's right, isn't it? And today you're going to tell us a bit about the first of those, the ATEAM trial for chronic back pain.
Yeah. So what I'd like to do, I think, is to give an overview of the main findings, and then from there maybe talk a bit about how research is reported and how it's taken up, because actually it's not as straightforward as just reporting facts.
Okay, so perhaps a good place to start would be if you could tell us a little bit about the ATEAM trial, what it was about, and maybe what ATEAM actually stands for.
Yeah, okay, so ATEAM is Alexander Technique Lessons or exercise or massage for chronic or recurrent back pain. And it was a very large, well-designed, well-conducted trial, which was funded by the Medical Research Council and the NHS. And the findings were published in the British Medical Journal, which is one of the leading medical journals. And then maybe in terms of what it showed, maybe we can start off, we look at some of the slides here, just in terms of what the study was about. So I'm going to start now with a slightly simplified version of the study design, and then in the next blog post we'll come back to see the full design. So what we're seeing here is how the participants were recruited by the GPs who were known to have either recurring or persistent chronic back pain. They were randomized to one of these interventions. Now, this type of back pain was what you call non-specific. So it's the most common type, and it's back pain that doesn't have any other underlying medical condition. So of the people who were recruited to the trial, a total of 579 were found to meet the trial eligibility criteria, and they were randomly allocated to one of 4 different types of intervention. So everybody in the trial continued to receive their usual care from their GP throughout. And then the first group you see here is what you might call the control group, who didn't receive anything in addition to their usual GP-led care. And the second group in blue, this was a group who were offered 6 sessions of therapeutic massage. And then the other 2 groups were both Alexander groups. So if you were allocated to one of these, then you were offered either 6 or 24 Alexander lessons. And these were one-to-one lessons with a STAT registered teacher.
Okay, and why was there a group who received massage?
Well, it's important to recognise this was not a trial comparing Alexander lessons with massage, but the reason that massage was there was it was really aiming to overcome any potential criticism about the fact that if you were in the Alexander group, you would have had a lot more individual care and attention than you would if you'd just been along to see a GP. And also, possibly it could tell us something about the nature of any benefit that's seen, whether it's predominantly therapeutic or educational.
Right, okay. And why were there 2 different groups for Alexander lessons with 6 and 24 lessons?
Well, the trial was really designed principally from an NHS perspective. And in terms of what's affordable on the NHS, they're quite used to offering, say, 6 sessions of physio or whatever. So that 6 lessons was deemed to be suitable. But from an Alexander teacher perspective, it's difficult to know what would be an average number that you think would be appropriate in order for people to be able to really begin to integrate what they're learning into their daily lives, to really to make that change. But, best guess, probably somewhere between 20 and 30 lessons. And we also knew from the trial that was done with people with Parkinson's that there were 24 lessons. And so 24 was chosen as really, the best guess.
Okay. And how did they assess the impact on back pain in the trial?
So it was a little bit unusual because there were 2 main measures rather than one. So one was the frequency of back pain. So the amount or number of days when people were experiencing their back pain within the last 4-week period. And then the second one was a very well-used outcome measure in back pain trials called the Roland Morris Disability Score, which basically is a series of questions that people answer, a kind of tick box, to give a level of the degree to which their back pain is impinging on their daily life. So, it could be questions like, can I do my usual daily tasks without being limited by back pain, that type of thing. And then in terms of when the main outcome measure, the endpoint was, so that was at 1 year after the participants started the trial, because really we're interested here in looking at to see if there are long-term, sustained benefits.
Yeah, very important for any kind of chronic condition like that, isn't it? Yeah. And what were the main findings of the trial?
Okay, so maybe here if we go back to the slides. So if we look at this slide, which is showing one of the 2 main measures, which is the pain frequency. And what we've got here are the number of days in pain per month after 1 year in the trial. So if we look first at the grey bar, so this is the control group of GP care alone, they were experiencing an average of 21 days of back pain per month, which is just a little bit less than what people were experiencing at the beginning of the trial. And then we've got the blue bar, which is the massage group. They had 14 days of pain per month, so 7 fewer. And the yellow bar is the group who were offered 6 Alexander lessons, who were experiencing 11 days of pain. And then the orange bar is a group offered 24 Alexander lessons, who had 18 fewer days of pain than the control group. In other words, they had only 3 days of pain per month, compared with 21 days for the control group. And this is a 86% reduction in the amount of pain. Now, all these reductions for the massage and the Alexander groups were statistically significant, which basically just means that the benefits that we see here were very unlikely to have occurred by chance alone. Okay, so if we move on now to the next slide. So in this next slide, we can see the results for the second main measure, which is the change in the Roland Morris Disability Score. So again, this is 1 year after the participants began the trial. And here we're actually looking at the difference from the control usual care group. So in the blue, you can see the massage group, and you can see that they were able to do, on average, about half a task more without being limited by back pain. However, this difference didn't reach statistical significance. In other words, this apparent difference from the usual care group could have arisen by chance. If you look at the 6 Alexander lesson group in yellow, so they were able to do, on average, almost 1.5 more daily tasks without being limited by back pain compared with the usual GP care group. And this difference was statistically significant. But if you look at the 24 Alexander lesson group in orange, they were able to do, on average, almost 3.5 more daily tasks without being limited by back pain. Also statistically significant. Now, there's a consensus among researchers involved in back pain trials that a difference of 2.5 or more in the Roland Morris score would be acknowledged as being clinically meaningful.
Mm.
So in other words, what we're seeing here overall is that if we're looking at the additional benefit compared with just usual GP care alone, we can see that massage might have maybe had a slight effect, but not significant. 6 Alexander lessons had more of an effect, and it was statistically significant, but it wasn't enough. Benefit wasn't enough to be considered to be clinically meaningful. But if you look at the 24 Alexander lesson group, they had a really marked effect, and this was considered to be both statistically and clinically significant.
Okay, so this looks like a big benefit for Alexander lessons, but I'm a bit puzzled as the 6 lessons clearly aren't as effective as 24, and yet you often hear people talking about the results for 6 lessons rather than 24 lessons.
Yes, and that's really, and it's true. There was, in fact, if you like, a subgroup who were offered 6 lessons followed by exercise, who did have quite a strong benefit. But we're going to look at that basically next time. So what we've been looking at here are the main results of the trial. And here we can see that really it's a 24 lesson group where you're seeing these really striking reductions in pain and disability.
Okay. Were there any other overall findings?
Yeah, there was a range of different outcome measures for pain and disability, and there were significant benefits, particularly with the 24 lesson group, across 8 of those. The other thing to mention is that there was a qualitative component to the trial. So an interviewer interviewed a sample of the participants, and those who were allocated to the Alexander groups, they all basically said things along the lines of, oh yeah, this really makes sense to me, and I'm actually better able now to manage my back pain.
Yeah, very important, as we know, that sort of sense of having some control over your own pain, isn't it? Yeah. Right, that's fantastic. So next time, you're going to tell us a bit more about the findings for the group who had 6 Alexander lessons and the exercise prescription. But in the meantime, are there any resources that people can have a look at if they want to find out more about the clinical ATEAM trial?
Yeah, what we'll do, I think, is put some resources on the ASO website alongside this blog post, including a link to the actual publication itself.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much.